Hello and welcome back to Women with Vision. Now we're talking about love and partnership in the 90s, and I have with me today Jack Carney. Hello Jack, and welcome to the program. Now you're a relationship consultant but also owner-manager of Partners for Life. Now it's quite an unusual ownership. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, I think we're very different from introduction agencies in general. We try to appeal to and attract people generally over 35, a little more emotionally mature, that want permanent partnerships only and who value personal development.
Right, so when you're talking about mature, you're talking about a certain age group?
No, I'm talking about emotional maturity more than
okay.
age maturity, but over 35 generally most of our people are.
Okay, so for those that are actually seeking Mr. Right, how difficult is it? What do you do?
I think one of the primary obstacles today is that a lot of the people out there and in the membership themselves are very uncertain about the value of a permanent partnership. They're running a bit scared. I think there's a lack of belief whether there's even a possibility to continue to have permanent partnerships now. It's interesting when you read the sociological studies done in the 60s and even in the 70s to have questioned marriage or any of the traditional roles. It just wasn't on. Now we reverse that. We question the entire thing. Should I get married? Should I have the career? Should I have children? So very, very much, and I think it unnerves many of us, especially the younger ones, to consider that we will be married for life.
It does.
Till death do us part.
That's right, and people seem to be getting married actually later on in life rather than earlier on.
Yeah, and I think there is an obsession with that personal freedom, the need to change, and that fits Pearl's credo of the 60s, I do my thing, you do your thing, and if that goes together, fine, if not, so we're very laissez-faire, I think, about it, and I think this fear of permanency is very real.
So what actually caused this trend?
I think there's many causes, but I think essentially the enormous social changes that have disrupted, if you will, our biological programming. I mean, science and technology has rearranged our roles. And it's very difficult for us, I think, to handle that freedom. What are we going to do with it? We don't have those social structures to promote permanent relationships as we used to have. And what's taking the place of that is marketplace activity. People, women, men are much more involved in their careers and economics than they are in relationships. And after all, the purpose of a human life, biologically speaking, is to produce more of it. And when you have that competition for the marketplace over that, then you have difficulties.
That's right. There's a lot more women getting into career now rather than family, and they are having family later on in life rather than earlier on.
Yeah, it's a surprising thing, as I put it. We are, in many senses, I think, disvaluing life, and there's a popular misconception that we are overpopulated in the West, and we aren't. We have been underpopulated. There's been a birth dearth since the 60s. And what better expression is there that there's something more important than reproducing life than that?
That's true. Now, it's always been men that seem to be allergic to commitment, but you're saying actually that women are starting to become allergic to it.
Very much so. I think it's quite interesting when you consider that now that women generally have that economic independence, along with that has come out these other features of why women essentially are more independently oriented or able to sustain independence more than men are. All the research basically shows that men suffer a great deal more from divorce and death of a partner than women do. And they generally get back into relationships much earlier as well. And the explanation for that is, I think, it's fairly basic. Most of us can understand it. Women generally have relationships other than the spouse. They have friends, they have family, they have their children. Men generally have only the spouse or the girlfriend, and when that cuts, they are dropping, they're falling.
Do you find that women are emotionally stronger, even though they are emotional as such? They seem to be emotionally stronger?
Well, I think they're much more facile with emotions, obviously, and that's a biological programming. I mean, women can handle it, and I generally tend to tell the men in the courses I teach and also in the partnership service that really women are men's emotional mentors.
That's true. Now, why bother to form an intimate relationship? I mean, a lot of women are probably saying that out there.
I hear that all the time. There is a lot of ambivalence. But I think when it comes down to it, most of us know that when you're lying in bed alone, whether man or woman, with your penthouse or your vibrator or whatever it's going to be, it's not going to be as satisfying as having the real thing. And I think there is a swing back. There is a pendulum swing back. As an example, the CEO of PepsiCo out of the States, I noticed recently, gave up her CEO job to go back to the family. And it was interesting, the reason that she gave was not so much that the family needs me, but I need the family. So there is a pendulum swing back, I think, to the family values and the need for permanent partnerships.
I think a lot of it, it's not so much actually having a partner there, it's having them as your best friend, someone to come home and talk to, those sorts of things.
Companionship is an incredibly important thing, and
definitely.
I think we know that. And it's a matter of getting, I think, in touch with the loneliness that we tend to overrate or hide as independence, and really much of our independence is just another name for loneliness.
You talk, we were talking before, and you're talking about an interdependent relationship. What is that?
Well, I look at it this way. You've got, most people think dependency is immaturity, which is true. Most people think independency is maturity, but I do not. It's an adolescent stage. It is something, it's a transition that you're going to be passing through. The highest is interdependence. And you cannot have that until you are independent. It takes strength to have an interdependent relationship. You must give up the independence for something of a higher value.
So it's more of the give and take process, is that what you're talking about?
More than that, I think it's two making one. There is almost a third entity. The partnership is a third entity. It's something that you are creating, both of you, and unless it's of higher value than each of you in it, you are not going to be able to seed your own individual needs. You're always looking at a dialogue, at two people. That's the most important thing, is the relationship itself, not the individuals in it.
Do you find that people actually getting into relationships, it's because it comes back to a trust factor a lot of the time too?
Absolutely.
Like putting joint bank accounts, just simple things like that, they find a hard time actually setting those up.
They do. I think we have much more of a contractual relationship mode today rather than a contactful one. And you cannot line up, in the counseling I do, when a person comes into me, the couples of the yuppie generation with their checklist, I'm bringing the BMW in the house and et cetera, et cetera.
That's right.
It won't work.
No.
It won't work.
No, it's friends of ours actually, just to take an example, are getting married soon, but they've found it very hard to actually set up a joint account because they've been so interdependent between themselves that to actually put some money and they both can use it is very hard for them.
And that's what you do. You
let
have
go.
to seed that for the greater value of the interdependent relationship itself.
So are women as a whole, obviously having children later on in life, are they finding that that it actually stops their careers, or it gives them that there's always been the thought that if a woman has a child, that she's back into a family, she's a mother, she's not a career person anymore. Is that sort of come into it?
I find it interesting in just my own general research and the counseling I do find a fair amount of executive women now are basically, there's a lot of peer pressure from their own females to consider the fact that trying to be a full-time housewife with the children is not worth their while. It's devaluing them.
Right.
So there is a real pressure, I think, on young executive women not to just be a housemother, get back into the careers as soon as possible. And I sort of laugh at it because I've seen them almost schedule. I'm going to have a birth for 1 month in my day timer. I'll take 1 month out, and I'll be back on the job. And of course, it usually doesn't work out that way.
No, and it becomes more matter of fact rather than emotional. And spending time with family, I think, is very important.
It is indeed.
All right, Jack. Well, thank you very much for that. And you'll return later in the show to discuss a few more issues.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll be back right after the break with Robin Coy and Marley Tosh and How to Attract Mr. Right. Hello and welcome back to Women with Vision. Now today, again, we're speaking to Jack Carney, owner-manager of Partners for Life. Hello Jack and welcome back.
Hi, Jen.
Now we're talking about the 11 rules of a perfect partnership. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, I have a handout sheet that we give out in the seminars and what have you. I think it's a good compilation.
Which I have here actually.
That's the one. For Partners for Life. But there are these 11 enriching activities, I guess I would call them, that you can do for and with your partner. And the more you do these, I think the more your relationship's going to thrive.
Right, okay. Well, if we start running through the different ones, start with number 1. Now, you've got never guess, never assume.
Right, as I put it, your task is to ask. I mean, how many times do we just simply assume and not ask our partner really what was meant by a particular action? And we usually assume the worst.
I find that coming from my husband, actually. Well, you didn't tell me.
And the task is to ask.
That's right.
What did you mean by that? Don't assume. Very important.
Okay, and your partner is not a sex or money object.
Very big one. I think we tend to turn ourselves into, we thingify ourselves. You know, this is sex, this is money. Obviously, the more important aspects are those virtues that are beyond those roles, and that's what you want to try to encourage.
Okay, and then we get to your partner is not a therapist or emotional nurse. That's an interesting one.
I think this is really a critical area. A lot of times on both of the sexes, we tend to use the other one as an emotional sop, a sponge. And really, the type of partnership I'm talking about takes some grown-upness. You cannot use that person as the therapist. And when you do, if you become addicted to that, then the relationship's going to suffer.
Very true. And teamwork makes love work?
Absolutely. You've got to do everything together. It's a dialogue. There shouldn't ever be unilateral decisions made. You really are a team, and you should look at it that way. That's what makes love work, is teamwork.
Definitely, working as a team and talking to each other. I think that's very important. Now, this is an interesting one, giving the 4 A's every day. Now we go attention, acceptance, approval, and affection.
Absolutely necessary. Attention, you know, you've got to attend to your partner as the most important end of your life. And the acceptance, it's the idea that you don't need to agree, but you do need to accept. There are going to be differences, and you have to go along with those. And approval, positive regard. We all grow in that nourishment of positive regard. And how often do we have that sharp-edged tongue when, if we would say those kind things, it's going to draw that out of our partner. Bring out the best,
Would
not the
that be
worst.
something like if you're getting dressed and say, how do I look?
Absolutely.
Nice.
Compliments. I mean, we don't compliment one another enough. And I think we have to be generous with that. And then that affection, as I call it, is the glue that holds together a relationship. Just the little things, doing things for your partner that shows that you really do care. And you do have to pay attention.
Just like leaving little notes in the fridge and
That's
things
lovely.
like that, just something lovely.
To have it opened up and see, oh, I love you, darling. It's a wonderful
Or
feeling.
just getting a message on your mobile phone.
Indeed. Flowers, whatever.
That's right, it's lovely. Now, build common interests.
Very important. I think couples generally do not work at building common. You must have those common interests, and sometimes you may have to do things for the relationship that you don't particularly want to do, but you, I think, should do that. Build those common interests. Find it.
Like watching them go and play sport or something like that
Whatever.
too.
I mean, if you have to stretch yourself a little bit to please your partner, do it. Try
Okay.
it.
Now, learn to be a better lover, and I like what you've said, lovers are made, not born.
Absolutely. You've got to ask again. I think we don't assume, and you've got to have the courage to ask both what you would like and also, is this what you want? To be able to really ask again and to commit to that sort of process of
Which
openness.
is always very hard because it also depends on how you've been brought up too.
Indeed. Yeah.
Now, do not play games.
Very important. I mean, how often do we see people in that one-upmanship games between couples, and it makes me cringe because that partner is the love of your life, and to hurt them in any of those ways, I think, is just hurting yourself. You're cutting off your nose to spite your face. So you don't want to play those games. You want to say what you mean and mean what you say.
Definitely. Now, take risks for more intimacy.
Yes, I think today a lot of us are afraid of intimacy. We're intimidated by it. I think it does take courage to expose ourselves, to be vulnerable, to allow the warts as well as the diamonds to show. And you've got to be able to take those risks if you want to grow.
I like the next one, be polite. I think that should be in everyday life.
Absolutely. I mean, how many times do we treat the people we love worse than strangers that we've met?
We do.
You know, a stranger can spill a cup of coffee and, oh, no problem, but our mate, what's wrong with you? What, you know, but no, you've got to be polite. You've got to show that.
Definitely. And coming to the last one, be concerned with loving rather than being loved.
Absolutely important.
give and
Absolutely
take.
important. The real tragedy, as it was said in the book, Love is a Many Splendid Thing, is not being loved. The real tragedy is not being able to love. And so many of us have never learned that art.
Definitely. Now, when you actually give these out, you're obviously a consultant, when you actually give them out to couples that come through or single people, how often do they actually go through this, and how many of these should they aim to achieve? So,
I would like them to keep these in mind and try to practice them throughout the day. I mean, you only learn by practicing, and you have to come to the conclusion that the relationship is the most important thing to you. Therefore, you have to nourish it. It's like a plant. You just can't water it once a week and hope it's going to grow. You have to pay attention to it. Be committed.
That's
Absolutely,
right.
all the time.
So, at least if they start with one and work their way through, they're developing on the relationship and
just refer to
enhancing
it. Just refer to it. Just think about what's important to you and also what your partner wants.
Very interesting. Well, thank you, Jack. Thanks for appearing on the program today, and congratulations on Partners for Life.
Thank you.
And if you'd like any further information on Partners for Life, please refer to the fax number on the screen or the email number, and we'll be back right next, actually, with Kathy Davis, who's here to talk about the film Oscar and Lucinda.
Welcome back to Women with Vision. It's a common perception that women are desperately seeking a man who will commit to a permanent relationship, and that men are just as desperately seeking to remain independent. But is this perception true? Our relationship consultant, Jack Carney of Partnerships for Life, doesn't think so. Jack, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Jack, you were telling me earlier that you think for every woman who is seeking a man to commit to a permanent relationship, there's also a man out there seeking to do the same thing.
I think absolutely up to that age of 55 anyway. I think there's many men seeking permanent partnerships as women are, but I think the problem is the men generally aren't as aware of really their needs as the women are. They tend not to admit they are lonely or to really pay attention to the fact that they need someone. So they're much more reluctant, I think, to go public with their need, because obviously for a man to show that you need is a fearful thing very oftentimes.
Very vulnerable.
It's tough. It is. It's very difficult. So, men tend to end up in the usual watering holes, the single scenes, rather than those places that they're probably more apt to find that permanent partner. So it's difficult for men, but I think there are as many single men out there for the single women as in terms of numbers. It's getting them out into the right place so that they can, if you will, expose themselves and allow that vulnerability to happen.
All right. So if someone is seeking a male partner for a committed relationship, Mr. Right, let's call him, how does she go about finding him?
Well, I think, again, that difficulty is that you've got to find the places as a woman where that misplaced, if I can put it that way, and unself-aware men are to link up with the woman that, in a sense, is longing and wanting to be found. And obviously there aren't a lot of those places. You need places like Partners for Life, but it's difficult to find those, I think. But there are ways of going about doing that.
Mm-hmm. And I think you were also saying earlier that many women actually aren't sure that that's what they want. They sabotage their own efforts.
Absolutely. I think the first thing that a woman's going to want to do is to really examine herself and her own wants and needs and really accurately find out whether she wants a permanent partner. I think that's the most important thing, because many women are ambivalent, deeply ambivalent about it.
Mm-hmm. So if you are ambivalent, which I find difficult to believe, but yes, I accept that. How do you go about assessing that sort of thing and determining whether you really do want a permanent relationship?
Well, I think a good place to begin is write down a single question. What is more important to you than finding a man to spend the rest of your life with? What else would you rather be doing with your time? And list the priorities that you would have that are higher than finding Mr. Right. I think what you're trying to do is to capture the most important reason why you're not seeking to meet and keep that man, and be very honest with yourself. It may be that it's not right for you, it's not the time, whatever. There's no opprobrium about being single, but I think you have to make your mind up that you really do want that.
And it's also almost like doing a cost-benefit analysis?
Absolutely. I think some of though, just before we get into that, the idea is that I think a lot of women have these either rationalizations or ways that they are ambivalent and keep them ambivalent. He's never going to change. I'm too busy pursuing a career. We have a lot of make-do things that are happening. So I think you have to come to that point where you're not intimidated by that risk for intimacy. And at that point, that's when you really want to make that cost-benefit analysis happen.
So that intimidation is actually causing some women to make it more difficult for themselves than they need to.
I think very much so, and that's where it takes, once you've come to that analysis of your needs and you have gotten over that ambivalence to the degree that you're ready to commit to go out and look, I think then you've got to have the courage to do that, and it is difficult.
Okay.
No doubt.
So if you've decided that you are ready for a permanent partnership, in your heart of hearts, and you're not going to work against yourself in your efforts, what do you do next?
Well, let's examine that cost-benefit analysis, and on one list make up a column of all the benefits that you have in remaining single, and the others the costs of not doing that, of going out and finding that man. And there are costs. I don't think one should try to paper that over. To be single and independent has its freedoms that are perhaps worthwhile to you, and being interdependently involved with that permanent partner also has it, and there are costs and benefits, and you must weigh those up very carefully in order to find out.
All right. So how do you find Mr. Right?
Well, I think what you want to do at this point, once you've made that cost-benefit analysis, and then